It would be easy to see Seminole County's hundreds of waterways as individual ecological jewels. But in the broader scheme, they're all part of a vast interconnected system. So what's good or bad for one can often have farther-reaching implications. For that and many other reasons, the Seminole County Lake Management Program pays close attention to maintaining the water quality at each of the county's lakes, as well as the cumulative effect it can have on the health of the entire watershed. Now, nowhere is that environmental stewardship more evident than here at Lake Jesup, where improving the delicate ecosystem is a cooperative effort. As one of the county's major lake restoration projects, personnel from multiple agencies spend time on the water and in the water to document changes, identify invasive species, and introduce native species. It's an active, hands-on approach designed to hopefully produce beneficial and long-lasting results.
What we're doing is documenting background information, and then we're going to follow up every couple of years to document changes to the vegetation community in the lake, which we hope to see as a result of changes in water quality.
Salvinia and Lemna, Stereophyllum, Hydrocotyle.
Today I just brushed up a little bit of my knowledge on the different plant species that are, dominant in Florida. Definitely have some native species and some also exotic species, and just learning all the different types of plants and how to identify them by looking at them.
Scarpus californicus.
Americanus.
Americanus. You got it. Thanks, sir.
The plant we have on this lake is Phragmites. It's an invasive plant. It occurs around much of this lake. Typically the way we control it is with herbicide to go ahead and kill it back, to let natives take the place of it. And as we improve water quality, we hope to be able to replace some of the Phragmites with beneficial native plants.
90% Phragmites.
Today we were definitely seeing a lot of the Phragmites and just a lot of invasive reeds and grasses. So some of them are showing that the lake is definitely rich in nutrients, and other the water quality is changing. So it's definitely interesting to look at how the lake is affecting the vegetation.
Using the GPS, we're carrying GIS basically into the field, mobile mapping things. We're able to put stuff onto the ground, position stuff probably within about a foot or so. But using that to help the biologists actually draw the shoreline out here, and again identify the specific plant communities to those things that we're mapping in the GPS.
It's pretty much the same as it's been for the last several years. It could definitely use some improvement. It needs submerged aquatic vegetation. That's plants that grow on the bottom and are in the water column itself. There's virtually none of that in the lake, and you really need quite a bit for a healthy system. There also needs to be some more emergence like bulrush. It's slowly coming in.
What we've done here is on both the east and west side of the 417 Toll Road Bridge is we selected this as a major site for restoration. It abuts to the Seminole County Natural Lands area, and we're targeting the emergent, as Ed was speaking of, the plants that grow out of the water to inhabit some more native plants and try and get better water quality and filtration for Lake Jesup. This project started with a cooperative effort with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Through their program, ARES, Aquatic Habitat Restoration Enhancement Program, there is a grant that's available, that's a cooperative grant that Seminole County applied for and did receive the funds for that. Basically, that's for the restoration and enhancement of habitat and wildlife in certain areas of the state, specifically for us in Seminole County.
We've been partnering with the Seminole County folks to do revegetation work and habitat enhancement work on Lake Jesup and some of the other lakes around. It's a cooperative effort where we pool our resources to accomplish projects that neither one of us alone might be able to do. And we've had several successful projects, and right now we're working on a large-scale project on Lake Jesup. This is an experimental eelgrass plot. Eelgrass is a submerged vegetation. It stays under the water. It's very desirable for fish and wildlife, provides very good habitat for them. We're trying to get it established in this lake, so we put out some experimental areas to grow it. We've had to put a fence around it because there's turtles that like to eat this grass, so we have to protect it until it has a chance to get started growing. And this is, we placed plants in here about 5 weeks ago, and we're just checking on it to see how they're doing today. Okay, here's the baby plants that it produced. They broke off when I pulled the mother plant up. As you can see, the one mother plant has produced 3 little baby plants, and this is how it expands. And there's quite a few of them down here I can feel with my feet, so they seem to be doing quite well. It filters the water. It also provides a place for insects to grow, which are food for the fish. It provides an area for the little fish to hide in when they're born until they can get big enough to survive out in the open areas. And things eat it too. Snails and turtles like to eat it, so it's a food source. So it's just a very beneficial and desirable plant.
That's the acer. Yeah, that's the acer. That's the Fraxinus with the, see the little wing seeds?
Some of the species that we've targeted out here, in particular, is the Phragmites, and as you can see behind me, you can see some of it treated. It has been treated by FWC over the past year. It's a very invasive plant. It is a native, but it is invasive, and it is very hard to treat. As you can see, battling it for over a year, we do have some regrowth of particular Phragmites. These are some old stands of the Phragmites that's since dead and died, but we will be revegetating with some native plants such as pickerelweed, duck potato, and bulrush in particular. Some of the efforts done to be able to treat this area properly is with cooperation again with Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. They've come in here and treated it extensively with some herbicides. We're actually standing in one of the tracks that has been recently treated. And you have a variety of species that are growing in here that we would like to get rid of before we can plant and have, again, that diversity native habitat. You can see some of the plant species down here. This common name is called pigweed or amaranthus. That's another one that readily takes over in Lake Jesup that we definitely don't want to see a lot of one type of plant. We want to see a lot of different types of plants and plants that filter better, and that's the whole goal with restoration.
This is a bulrush, a giant bulrush, and it provides cover for fish. Birds like to roost in it, and some birds even nest in it. And it provides a food supply for some things. So it's just another desirable, beneficial plant. These are plants that the county and the FWC have been jointly cooperating on planting. We put about 50,000 along this stretch of shoreline, plus some additional ones further down the lake.
Lake Jesup is going to be a long-term project for all of the agencies, not only the state agencies, the local agencies, but also the homeowners that are directly living adjacent to Lake Jesup. Basically within Seminole County, everything drains into Lake Jesup and therefore flows into the St. Johns River, which is considered an outstanding Florida water body. So we have a lot of concerns about, what's going into Lake Jesup, what's happening in Lake Jesup, and these types of restoration projects are critical to improving the health of Lake Jesup long term. So it is going to be a collaborative effort, not only from the state and government agencies, but also from the folks that live in the watershed.
If there was no action taken on this lake, we would expect it to continue to decline. The water quality is pretty bad now, but it is improving. But the fish and wildlife populations would decline radically as the lake deteriorated.
So all these roots are the rhizomes of the Sacculipus?
It's all stems. They
Stem.
root from the nodes.
It's a huge diversity of plants, vegetation. It's a really beautiful area, so we definitely want to keep it as pristine and protected as possible.
Some of the aspects of managing this type of of restoration projects and some of the equipment that's needed is, you know, of course with Lake Jesup you'll need an airboat. We do work with GPS units to coordinate some of the start and end points of the project. We have heavy equipment that comes in for herbicide use, as you've seen in the photos or the video clip that had the large buggy that comes in to this marsh area that no boat or no truck can reach. So it's that in-between zone. In between that, when the water comes up in Lake Jesup, which is quite often, they come in with the airboats to maintain that. But basically, to be able to successfully maintain a restoration site dealing with aquatic plants, you need an integrated management approach. You need a biological approach, you need a chemical approach, and sometimes you need a mechanical approach, is where you have, you know, other heavy equipment coming in and, let's say, mowing it down, which is a job that FWC just completed in this area, as you can see. And all of those three combined efforts is what helps a restoration site long term.
Any good carpenter, mechanic, or plumber will likely tell you the quality of their work often depends on the quality of their tools. As we saw with the work being done on Lake Jesup, the men and women restoring Seminole County's lakes aren't using hammers and wrenches. It takes a lot of heavy metal to dig out tons of underwater muck and chew through acres of unwanted vegetation. On Kewaunee Lake, county forces needed to apply a number of powerful assets to accomplish both of those objectives. Rejuvenating the lake meant scooping out, eradicating, and transporting a lot of unwanted plants and trees. The net benefits being exponential: a better lake and a healthier overall system.
We're here at Kewaunee Lake Park. This is another lake management restoration program project. And basically what's going on with this particular park is we're removing some of the invasive exotic species that are existing within this 4-acre lake, and we'll be revegetating it with native beneficial plants. This particular project also included several trees that had to come down, the Chinese tallow in particular, that is an invasive plant and something that we don't want within our watershed. This particular project is important to us because this is actually one of the headwater areas to Lake Howell, and Lake Howell ends up draining to Lake Jesup via the Howell Creek system. So by restoring the headwaters of the watershed in this area, we're able to do some water quality uptake and treatments that'll affect downstream and ultimately back to our Lake Jesup project and into the St. Johns River. So we always look at watershed approaches to our management projects. Trees can be invasive exotic as well. They displace the native community. Instead of having some nice cypress trees or bay heads, they end up taking the entire shoreline. And those particular trees come up with a sucker that comes all the way up and down the shoreline that also prevents even the native herbaceous from coming in. So it's definitely detrimental. Some of the equipment that you can see today is, you can see this is actually one of the loaders, so when they excavate the material, they're able to transport it to land. We have the spider that's also running out here, which is clearing the tussock, allowing for some more water circulation and flow, as well as the harvester that's working on the far end, and that's working on the emergent shoreline. There's torpedo grass that's in there, all torpedo grass that's all coming out, and we will be replanting that with beneficial pickerel weed, duck potato, and canna, which is what we always recommend for anybody living lakefront. In particular with Lake Kewaunee and the lilies, there wasn't funding to be able to treat those properly, and now we have that slight funding in place where we can mechanically remove them, and we'll be maintaining that with herbicides just to make sure the project is protected well into the future.
Since every Seminole County lake is different, the same approach to restoration isn't always necessary. On Mullet Lake, it wasn't brute force required to revitalize the ecosystem. Instead of macro management, efforts centered more on micromanagement techniques. A pair of rubber boots and some individual strands of grass will ultimately give the lake new life.
This is Mullet Lake Park in Seminole County, and this area behind me here had been devoid of vegetation because of boat launching and human activity over the years. So we've come back in and worked with Seminole County to reestablish aquatic native vegetation. And we've planted a variety of different species here to create a diverse habitat for fish and wildlife. And this is funded through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission's Aquatic Habitat Enhancement and Restoration Program, where we receive funds from the legislature that are dedicated to doing enhancement of aquatic habitat, such as this planting you see behind me. There's a variety of species. There's fireflag, and there's giant bulrush, and there's spartina, which is a wiregrass, and burr marigold, and some other species. Once again, these are all native common species in this area, and they all have important functions for fish and wildlife habitat. Projects like this are kind of long-term. It'll be at least a year or two before it fills in and looks nice, but in 2 to 3 years it should be lush and filled in and be very functional.
While the focus of restoration efforts at some lakes is on enhancing vegetation, it's not the case everywhere. Unlike Mullet Lake, Redbug Lake suffered from the opposite problem. Instead of too many areas of open water, there were some places you couldn't see any water at all. So the vitality of Redbug came down to one priority: removal.
We are here at Redbug Lake Park, and behind me is actually Redbug Lake. Had you been here prior to us coming in and starting this restoration event, you really wouldn't know that there's a lake back here. It became inundated or covered with invasive native plants, actually cattail and some of the water lilies that made recreation nearly impossible. As you can see out here, some of the water lilies is just making it navigably impossible for people to recreate or fish among, and we're going to be thinning out some of these lilies to be able to open that up for the public to be able to use. When you have too much of this native vegetation, it does impede the wildlife, so we do want to maintain that as a balance for the lake. And as you can see behind me, this is the cleared version of all the cattail removal that has just transpired, and all of this material is now being consolidated up into this area that will wind up in the landfill. We will have a restoration event where we're going to have volunteers from the community coming in and helping us replant with some beneficial natives and just helping some of the runoff that's coming from the park into the lake.
What this piece of equipment is specifically is a spider, and it's used to reach steep banks and create steep grades. It's really good at reaching these hard to get to places where other equipment can't get to, and it does a really good job getting down to the bottom and grabbing the roots of these plants that we don't want.
Problems with having invasive plants within an area is the native community, whether it's waterfowl or other types of organisms, it's just too dense for them to do what they do naturally. So that's why we want diversity, so they can have food to forage, shelter for cover, and other sources that they utilize a diverse plant community with. When you have a solid stand of cattails, that diversity is lost, so you just really essentially get what's called a monoculture of one particular bird species. You don't have that Florida diversity that we look for. This project is actually a cooperative project with the Florida Lake Management Society. And we were awarded a grant actually as a cost share to do some of this work. Because it has public emphasis, there's an elementary school nearby. It's a heavily utilized, one of the most heavily utilized parks within Seminole County. We were awarded this grant, so that's basically how we had this project come to fruition. We also have a lot of cooperative efforts within Seminole County, not only the Lake Management Program, which is what I'm with, but also Leisure Services, who's been helping us facilitate the project as well.
Restoring the natural balance of an entire system won't happen overnight, but with continuing dedication and oversight by water management professionals and the conscientious participation with an active community, Seminole County should be able to look forward to achieving its ultimate goal of healthy, thriving waterways.